one of the things you got to see is the new interface based on Material U. So we're going to show a little bit more about that, and so you can see kind of like what's involved. Awesome. So the best thing about the new Google system is, and the new Android system, is that there are really some fundamentally great opportunities to be able to customize the UX of the system. And so there's some amazing features with Material U that are coming out. So if you have a Pixel phone, or if you join one of the beta groups, then you'll be able to get those now. And then if you're just in the general public, you'll see those coming towards the fall and winter, towards Christmas time this year. The other thing we want to go over is talking about like what's new in the actual build of Android One outside of the design. So one moment, we'll show a little bit of that as well.
And with this latest milestone build, we're finally seeing some of the visual changes that have been hinted at since the first developer preview. That said, we're still a few months away from stable Android 12.
One moment. It did something strange. Let's try that again. Okay.
Android 12 has just reached public beta status, and with this latest milestone build, we're finally seeing some of the visual changes that have been hinted at since the first developer preview. That said, we're still a few months away from stable Android 12. So quite a lot of the stuff you probably saw in the Google I/O keynote still is not ready in this build. Anyway, let's take a look at what's new in the first beta of Android 12. Take a sec to subscribe so you don't miss more videos like this one, and we'll jump in. Almost everything new in this beta has to do with Material U, the new Google design language that is the latest iteration of Material Design. Thicker lines, larger rounded corners, bouncier animations, and bigger text. It's the start of the biggest Android design change in at least 5 years. First change you'll notice is the larger lock screen clock, which expands to fill the display when you don't have any notifications. And the notifications themselves have been redesigned in line with Material U. The same goes for Android's quick settings with this new style brightness control and text labels. It's a pretty dramatic departure from the look and feel of Android 11, and that style also carries over to the new thicker volume control panel. Meanwhile, in the Settings app, the design changes that were codenamed Silky Home in previous builds are now fully implemented, with Samsung-style headers that expand to help you more easily reach the controls at the top. And there's a new highlight effect when you tap on menu items. Kinda hard to see, but there is a very subtle noise pattern to this effect, which is a nice little visual flair. In other areas, Material U is sort of half implemented, so things do look a little bit weird. And in typical Google fashion, there's quite a bit of stuff that was announced at I/O that isn't enabled in this build. There are big changes coming to the way Android widgets look and behave, and while the rounded corners are there and there is this new conversation widget that looks similar to the leaked People Space feature in previous builds, right now this is basically just a shortcut to any one of your recent conversations. And coming to Pixels in Android 12 will be the new privacy dashboard, and privacy-centric features like visuals for when apps are using your camera and location, plus the ability to limit apps to only use your approximate location. However, none of that stuff is enabled in this first beta build. The big one though is of course the color extraction feature that'll help pull complementary colors out of the Material Design palette to match your wallpaper. That's a big part of the new look that's currently not live here. You can kinda get the feel for how it'll work by setting a custom accent color in this build, but the idea is eventually it'll work automatically and pull out more than one color in a way that complements the UI. So when you get your Pixel 6 or the final Android 12 build on an existing Pixel this fall, the whole color scheme and design language is going to look and feel pretty different to this first beta. One feature Google has enabled in this beta though is app hibernation, which makes Android a bit smarter about how it handles apps you haven't used in a while. These will automatically have their temporary files, but not personal app data, removed from them. And they'll also lose any permissions that you granted to them. Another behind-the-scenes change is the Private Compute Core, which is a new separate part of the OS that's siloed away to ensure the safety of your personal data when it's being used for AI features. Think things like live caption or now playing on a Pixel phone. Android 12 makes it easier to use your phone for this kind of stuff, while also keeping your private data secure. So, as big as all the changes coming in Android 12 are, there is still a whole bunch of them that we can't really play with yet in its first beta, and as such, it seems a little further behind perhaps than we were with the first betas of Android 10 or Android 11. You can enroll any recent Pixel, Pixel 3 or above, via the web and they'll get the beta, but do expect bugs and some incomplete features here and there. There'll be 3 more beta builds released before Android 12 is finalized this fall, and we'll have full coverage of what's in each build as they land. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss that. In the meantime, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Okay, well, awesome. So you can see there's tons around the interface and usage of Android and what's happening, including some of the maps that Sophie is working on, map features. So one of the things that we're going to talk about is, in App Campus specifically, is how we can look at some of the features of Android and iOS and be able to design key tools for each of the systems. And so that includes Android, that includes iOS, and that includes a third category we're going to talk about a little bit later today called progressive web apps. And so with every single system, we have a ton of interesting options that you could actually activate when you design your apps. And so Material U is one of those systems. And then behind Material U is the sort of code, the main toolkit that we're going to talk about is the native Android development, which is a language was called Kotlin. We were saying that right, and then Flutter. And so for those of you who don't know about Flutter, I'm going to walk you through a little bit of how apps are actually designed for Android using Flutter. And the greatest thing about Flutter is there are tons of new features coming every single day. Tons and tons and tons. So Flutter is its own ecosystem where you can design apps from a single code base. You can design mobile, web, desktop, embedded apps, all from one thing. So it doesn't matter whether you're building iOS, Android web, React Native, or other platforms in order to put together your app platform. So we'll talk quite a bit about Flutter in App Camp and then be able to tell you kind of how you repurpose what you're doing on your website or what you're doing on your previous builds of your system. So if you have a previous build in Swift or Kotlin or any of the other systems that you've used to design your app so far, you can actually repurpose that and use it directly in Flutter. And so there is an SDK that is available to do that. I know sometimes people's eyes glaze over when they see these like curly brackets and all these fun code things, but actually it's like super easy to use. So we're going to walk you through like, what does that mean? How do you begin to use this beautiful new UI stuff that's happening both in iOS and Android to be able to put together your apps? And then every single thing you build with Flutter, whether it's in iOS or Android or progressive web apps, your functionality will repurpose itself for use, for native use in those systems. So there are tons of apps that actually have been built with Flutter. And so you can see a bunch of different ones. So you see a BMW built apps with Flutter, banks built apps with Flutter, Tencent, Square, Google Assistant is built with Flutter. And all these companies have used Flutter as a part of their development ecosystem. And so why this is important for non-technical people is because it actually gives you a way to be able to have conversations with your developers, with your CIO, with your CTO during that prototyping phase. Once if you use a paper prototype, once you move past the paper prototype and you're beginning to test with users, it's a way for you to converse and collaborate with your developers that is not so disjointed, right? So they're not just making stuff and saying, do you like it? And then you're going back and forth. You have a more productive developer ecosystem with Flutter. And so Flutter is really designed to take advantage of those new Android features, as well as the new features from the other platforms as well. And then you can see, again, more different apps that are built in Flutter, including eBay's new app, eBay Motors, and a lot of other new apps that are just, wonderful. And you can see how flexible Flutter is as a platform. There's also a really great YouTube channel for Flutter Dev. And one of the things that is there is that there are actual, let's see, there are talks, and there's actually this really cool series. I think I'll have to I'll finally have to put it in here it is, the widget of the week, right? And what's cool about the widget of the week, I will play the video in 1 second, is it actually shows every single component of how you can add new features and do new things inside of Flutter that are really helpful for you in terms of building the feature functionality of your app. So let me actually present this tab, and then we can show just a little bit of what widget of the week is. Okay.
Even with over 100 episodes, Widget of the Week has still only scratched the surface of the hundreds of widgets in the Flutter framework. There are a lot more for us to get through, with new widgets and new packages being added constantly. Thank you for being with us along this journey of exploring obscure widgets, common widgets, and so many others in between. Your comments, views, and excitement for learning more all about Flutter widgets keeps us going, and for this, our 100th episode, we bring you the Flutter logo widget. If you need a dynamic Flutter logo, just use the Flutter logo widget. You can give it a size to make it bigger or smaller, but it doesn't stop there. Add in the style parameter to add the Flutter title. By default, it's marked only to just display the logo, but you can set it to horizontal for Flutter to appear next to the logo or stacked to have it below. The Flutter logo happen. Set it to a curve like bounce in, out, and then change the size to see it bounce in and out. And then change the duration to slow it down. All of this is powered by an animated container and a special Flutter logo decoration to handle painting the logo onto a canvas. You're the reason we've made it to 100 episodes of Widget of the Week. Thank you for watching and being with us. And, as always, for more info on all the Flutter widgets, head on over to flutter.dev.
Now, I just want to point out something very easy about Flutter is you can see that the code for Flutter is actually very easy to understand. This is built in very basic English, right? So Flutter logo, and then how to structure the commands and things like that. And this is what it really helps enhance your ability to co-create with your developers, like very specifically about how you want it to bounce in and out, what kind of logos, so you can do this with other logos as well, and how you want to structure every single part of the design of your app. So you have a lot more control in customization options and creativity you can enact with your app when you're using the Flutter developer ecosystem. And so we have one question. So is Flutter required for the app camp? No. So Flutter isn't required for the app camp. It's just one of the options we go over to develop your MVP and your prototypes. We have other low code, no code options as well that we talk about. in terms of building out apps and prototypes. We're going to talk about a wide variety of tools. Are there any other questions before we start going a little bit more into Google Play and distributing apps?
Marie, Gloria is raising her hand earlier. And
Yes.
also
Gloria and who?
Deepa.
Oh, okay. Gloria, you have a question?
Oh no, I think I accidentally pushed it. Thank you though.
Oh, okay. And Deepa,
Yeah.
did you have a question?
No.
Oh, okay.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
You mentioned that we can repurpose what we've previously built and be able to transfer that into Flutter. So if you previously built your web app in AWS, you can repurpose that code and put that into Flutter?
Well, there's AWS is the back end.
Okay.
So AWS as a back end can be repurposed into other back ends. So you can repurpose it into Google Cloud or Microsoft Azure. But the front end, the web parts can be repurposed, right? So the front end of how it's visualized and how, I'm not sure, do you have a web
like
app?
React, if we use React. Okay.
Yeah, so React. Yeah, so React is one of those that transfers perfectly over to Flutter.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
So, I have a quick question. So for the web part, I'm more interested on the web part rather than the mobile. So how?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. How do we have to move the whole code base? Like, for example, currently we have it with Angular, right? Angular and TypeScript. So TypeScript, JavaScript, TypeScript, both. For the backend, we use TypeScript, and then for front end, JavaScript. So how do you go about moving this whole code base? If we have to, what are the, because I know that Flutter is mainly used for mobile.
Yeah, it's also used for web apps as well. So the real answer is it depends. It depends on how you've constructed your app. But I can say as a coder, it generally, when you build anything in one system these days, you can transfer it to another system fairly easily. It's a matter of, the hardest part is if you have not documented your system. Is your system already documented?
I'm afraid.
Oh. So that's one of the first best practices we work with everybody, and we'll work with an App Camp is, right, so Sophie touched on it just a little bit when she talked about paper prototypes, but being able to document how your app has gotten built, that's like one of the #1 things we correct with our clients at Data 360 is saying, hey, let's document what you have. Let's document what it is, and let's move forward and make sure your app and the documentation get built at the same time. I know your developers will never tell you this, and I'm violating developer code, right? But you need to document everything that you build with any technology, because you never know what's going to happen. You may change people, you may change, your budgets may change, your whole business may change. And you always need that documentation if you're going to have someone else or some other process be involved.
Yeah, we do have some documentation, but it's not up to date. That much I can say. It's pretty old. Our code base is also pretty old, I would say.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, then, there are some shortcuts to getting that up to date. And getting that done, but don't be afraid. It is solvable.
Yeah, because most of the times I've heard Flutter for iOS and Android development only, but not many people have. I've heard talk about web and desktop too, right?
Yeah. Flutter is a newer tool, but it's actually awesome because it just goes into so many different platforms, and it doesn't separate out Apple versus Android versus all these other things, right? And then it takes advantage of all these new features that are in Android, and then whatever new features come up in iOS, it also accounts for those as well. So increasingly, all of the companies are starting to work together. So now Google's moved a lot of its tools onto Azure. Microsoft and AWS have tools on each other's systems. So, there are lots of different interesting ways to deal with, the cross-platform issue.
Okay.
And so that's one
I'll
of the
just
reasons.
look into it more. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. So that's one of the reasons why we talk about different ones. Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question. I saw Android 12 has a new Material U. I like that so much. And I know that what's new in and its customization is huge power. But what is how much optimized is software? I would like to know the optimization of the Android 12.
Yeah, so you want to know about optimizing for the new code base, the new Android base. So those options actually will appear in both the Android Developers Kit as well as the Flutter. So that there are different, sort of a longer answer is going through each of those development kits and then sort of learning about the options that you'll have in those. And then it also looks like Lisa has a question. You raise your hand, or is that from before?
That's from before.
Okay.
Let me put it down.
All right. Are there any other questions before we move into Google Play? Okay.